Good evening and welcome to the October 29th meeting for the Ames Community School District Board of Directors. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Director Benkin, will you please read the mission statement?
Yes, I'm not on that
Oh,
page.
sorry, I cut you.
The mission of the Ames Community Schools is to ensure that all learners develop the knowledge, skills, attitudes, values, and personal esteem necessary to grow in and shape a changing society.
Thank you very much. Chris, I need a motion to open the public hearing, right? I'll entertain a
motion, you just open it.
I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing for the tennis court easements. Does anyone from the public desire to speak? Seeing none, I will go ahead and close that public hearing. Okay. All righty, we will go ahead and read the statement on information for discussion items. Residents of the district, students attending the district, parents or guardians of students attending the district, and district staff members may address the board about any topic relevant to the district, whether on the current agenda or not. Those who wish to speak must sign up at the beginning of the meeting. Speaker participation is limited to 3 minutes once per item. The views and opinions of citizens addressing the board do not necessarily reflect those of the board, district administration, or staff. Speakers are to remember that Iowa law prohibits the board from discussing specific employees, students, or their performance. Student speakers will state their name and school. Others will state their name and address. And our first item for discussion items is the update on the Ames High School project. Jerry.
Jerry, before you get started, welcome to our visitors tonight. Thank you so much for coming. We have future teachers among us tonight and special education, right, as well. So thank you so much for being here.
We enjoy the added noise in the audience, so thank you for being here tonight.
So I have a PowerPoint presentation, not being really skilled and experienced in PowerPoint. Patrick said to wait for a minute.
And your mic's not on.
It's not on?
There you go.
Gotcha. There we are. So the new high school project, I just want to give you a report or an update on that. I'll start out with the big topic in the subject. Our budget for this project is $123 million. At the end of schematic design, our construction manager prepared a cost estimate, and currently our estimated cost is $137.5 million. So what that means is that we're $14.5 million over budget. So far, the schematic design, the architects have included everything that we've asked for in that budget. So what I want to do in this presentation, I wanted to revisit the path that we've taken to get to this point, then talk about the action that the design team and district staff have taken in response to this, define the options, and then also share the timeline with you. Back in May of 2017, our Phase 1 architectural study was done, and that was based on areas of 1,400 to 1,600 students. And they developed 3 options as far as like layouts of buildings, and those options range from 320,000 square feet to 340,000 square feet. That doesn't include the swimming pool. So this is the only time I'm going to separate the swimming pool in this discussion. From now on, I'm talking just project costs. Just we're looking at it at a high level, and so I want to be able to kind of stay with that focus. The corresponding budget with those square footages range from 96 to 105 million. Again, just the high school, not the pool. When we engaged OPN in doing the design, they continued through the program design phase, and we got that included space for 1,600 students with a build-out of 1,800. We've, over the year and a half since the first report was prepared, we've had discussion on enrollment trends, and previously they've been pretty steady and flat, but since in the last 18 months then we've seen some more excitement in that. And so we talked about, do we build for 1,600 or 1,800 and how much the addition goes, but We focused in the architects on the 1600 with the 1800 build out. That represents 406,000 square feet. The program design cost estimate was just at $125.5 million, which wasn't of concern at that level. Since then, the architects have gone back through and reconciled the estimate between the architect and the estimator. They identified areas of where the cost increased between the program and the schematic estimate. So by doing that, they identified the areas to focus on. I then asked them to go through the exercise. I wanted to list the ideas and cost reduction items that would get us from the 137 down to the $123 million budget. And this was an important exercise because what that displayed, or what we realized with that, is that in order to make that reduction, we're going to have to cut program, and we're going to have to reduce the square footage of the building. We also always want to do through the process is find efficiencies in the design. Simple things like if there's ways to do some reconfiguration of the exterior of the building, we can reduce square footage of walls. So they did a little bit of that streamlining in the process. In order to keep the design schedule, in order to continue with the design, we're going to need to make the very important decision related to budget or area of the building. Delaying this decision is going to delay the design in the project and opening in August of 2022. So I challenged the design team to continue to seek areas for cost reductions throughout this process. The district staff, we went to find potential funding available within the PEPL or the SAVE funds. So I presented a budget to the PEPL committee that illustrated $3 million worth of potential funding from PEPL. By doing that, I was able to do that by postponing a couple of projects that aren't severely urgent. Other than that, we're not sacrificing anything that we have planned or programmed in the PEPL budget. Chris was also able to look at the SAVE funding and was able to see where we'd have an opportunity to find $7 million. On the GO bond for the elementary additions, we were obligated by the vote and by how we presented that to spend $5 million on the elementaries. With that, due to the escalation and potential cost increase for the programs, we also have an extra $2 million set to be able to fund that. So we tried to look at the budget overall in the projects that we have that we can anticipate and not put all of our last eggs in one basket. So I think there's still a little bit of a room, and by doing that, we aren't going to sacrifice any existing programs. So the sources for funding is $7 million from SAVE and $3 million from PEPL. So when it boils right down to it, we've got two options. The first option is to cut program, which means reducing the building square footage, cutting areas. And so if we decide to do that, we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and make some hard decisions about which areas to cut. When I talk about program, you're talking about academics, CTE, fine arts, athletics, common space, or which one of those programs you cut a little bit out of everyone, or do you cut a lot out of one or several of them? But at this point in time, at this juncture, based on the cost estimate and the current budget, we aren't going to be able to get everything we want within the current budget. The other thing we can do is to increase the budget. So we found a potential of $10 million that we can do without really sacrificing anything. If we're going to do this, I'd like to direct OPN to seek economical and efficient designs with the goal of reducing the project costs. I think we should authorize them to proceed with the direction to identify and present areas for reduction without reducing the building area wherever practical, And I'd like to be able to work that through the steering committee just so that we understand what's being reduced and what type of choices and options are being made. And then I think we should mutually agree with them to accept the final scope and the budget based on the completed design development documents and the associated cost estimate. At the end of design development, there's enough information to be able to get prepare a confident cost estimate. And then at that point in time, we'll also know we'll have a better feeling for what funding is available. So really, I'm suggesting that we try to work to find out where in the middle we can meet between 0 and the 14.5 million. The design development cost estimate is due at the end of January is when we're scheduled. So as far as the timeline goes, our steering committee meets about every month or once a month here, and we're pretty much on that regular cadence. We're looking to be able to approve the design development in January 28th of 2019, and then provided that works out successfully, then we'll go ahead and continue through the construction documents, and that's preparing the drawings and specifications to put out to bid. And we'd receive bids in early May, start construction 6 weeks after that, and then we'd open up the new building in August of 2022. So that's what I have. If you have any questions or any discussion, I want to.
One of the things that the steering committee found out 10 days ago when this was presented was the overage. And so the first thing we asked staff was to consider, as Jerry talks about, what opportunities there are for us to increase our budget, but then also going back to make sure we get all of the needs within this high school program, and understand maybe what wants are out there, but we can maybe pull back on. So the thing that we've talked about in the past is never really setting a formal budget for the high school, and so really adding $10 million to this would probably set a high limit on the high school budget. And maybe Chris can talk to a little bit. The thing we didn't want to have happen was deplete all of our reserves, and so within SAVE and also within PEPL, there are reserves should something else happen. The other thing to note is if SAVE were to extended 10 years, our financial position looks a lot different. So maybe Chris, you can talk about how you got to the 7 million added, and then what the implication of if SAVE were to get extended.
Sure. So we had presented numbers a few weeks ago, or probably been a couple months now, of how much bonding capacity we actually had on sales tax if we wanted to completely bond out. And Tim Oswald from Piper Jaffray had calculated for us that if we bonded in 2021, based on what we're allowed to do, which is 0% growth with a 2-to-1 coverage ratio, we could issue bonds in the amount of $18,920,000. Now that isn't all available because we'd have to put $1.9 million immediately into the debt service fund as the 10% reserve. But between that and cash on hand, then we would, after paying for, assuming an $18 million budget for the pool, we would have approximately $10 million of funding available. My concern is, has always been, once you bond the bond capacity, that decreases the revenues that you have in later years because you have more of the ongoing revenue going towards principal and interest payment. So it creates a problem in the out years, and because the current law only has the sales tax going out to 2029, we can only bond over 10 years. We can't bond over 20 like we used to. So when you're bonding $18 million over 20 years, it takes a lot less of your yearly revenue to service that debt as it does if it's bonded over 10 years. I was worried about having enough for the elementary additions and making sure that what Carl had planned for technology was in. As Director Deerdorf said, I'd feel a lot more comfortable if we knew the sales tax was extended. At this point, we're limited to the revenues through 2029. If it were to be extended in the session, based on the bill that had been presented or passed through the House, we would have to have another vote on our revenue purpose statement and to use revenues past 2029, so it would still probably be 6 months before we'd have that authority to do it. But we we don't project using anything out of PEPL until 2020 and sales tax till 2021, so we can certainly adjust that, and we would be able to come up with all of the 10 million then out of sales tax if the extension is passed. But in good conscience, I can't recommend completely draining or making a recommendation that would completely drain SAVE without that assurance. And the only thing we can do is act on current law now. So I feel much more comfortable with the combination of PEPL and sales tax to come up with this money.
I think when I was first informed of this issue, I was a little concerned. That's an understatement. I was a lot concerned. You know, we had gone to the community, talked about what the high school was going to cost. In that discussion, we never talked about using PEPL funds, especially after the community had greatly supported passing the PEPL vote a year or less than nine months for another 10-year extension of that. And those funds are supposed to be used for particular things. And you know, so when I first caught wind of this, I was like, that's really not what we said to the community. But we are in this position. We need to get this project done. And I do support doing what we need to do that. I'm strongly in the belief that there has been so much pressure on the legislature and the governor, current or future, that this SAVE is going to be extended in some way, shape, or form. The details, yes, need to be worked out legislatively, but the lower house of the legislature passed it overwhelmingly. I think it was unanimously in the last session. It just got stalled in the Senate for silly reasons. Both sides have talked about doing something about it, because the fact of the matter is if it doesn't pass, property taxes are going to get hit pretty hard throughout the entire state. And I don't think any legislator or future governor is going to want to talk about, oh yeah, we didn't do that again, and now your property taxes are going to go up. They don't like to talk about that very much. So with that said, I support right now us doing the appropriate thing fiscally, and from a fiduciary responsibility we have is that we have to have our finances in line when we make this decision to move forward. If that means in the short term committing those PEPL dollars, I'm comfortable with that. But, big but, once that extension is passed by the legislature, I expect us to then make the changes so that we're using the sales tax dollars for this, and we can uncommit the PEPL dollars that we're talking about doing right now. You know, that's just in a worst case scenario if for some reason the SAVE legislation does not get extended this year. Yes, we can move the project forward. Does that make sense? I hope so. So under those circumstances, I will support it only if we could drive forward when the legislation changes, and we can replace that with the penny cent sales tax in the future.
I have a question. What would be affected by taking that money out of PEPL? So what would have to get cut, basically?
We basically pushed a couple projects. I've got a cooling tower at the middle school that is it's not in dire need, but I want to be proactive about it. But we're able to maintain that, so I can push that, let that slide a year or so. There's another project that we were looking at considering and that was the addition to the middle school gymnasium entrance, a modification there. Other than that, we're not sacrificing any other program. We aren't tapping into technology, whether it's to reduce or postpone that. The other projects, we're kind of in a really nice position because we've got, with the construction program that we've completed, we don't have a lot of immediate needs. So we might not ever have a better opportunity than this to utilize this fund. So I'm also able to maintain a $2 million fund balance, and that's a kind of an extra security blanket. I think on one year we dropped down to 1.7 million, but then it feeds back up then after that. And then I also carry a $400,000 contingency for smaller things, but historically over the last 8 years I haven't spent more than $5,000 out of that contingency. So the answer is we aren't sacrificing anything we've got. We tried to look at it, like I said, holistically, so that we aren't forgetting anything and not accounting for something. So we've got a little bit of money set aside for the elementary program, so we don't short ourselves on that.
Thank you.
I do. I actually have several questions. I don't know if they're for you or for Chris or whoever wants to answer them. So I just need some help figuring out where the money's coming from. Because my understanding is that you want to talk about the project separately, that there's the high school and then there's the pool, right? And my understanding is that the pool is right around 19 million?
It's 18 project costs.
18 million?
Yes.
And that's all coming out of SAVE?
Yes.
Okay. And so for the high school, we bonded for that.
Yes.
And so you are now hoping that we can have 3 million come out of PEPL, and that money is really kind of it's money that we would otherwise spend on other students, right?
On
so
buildings.
You're talking about the cooling tower at the middle school?
It's on buildings. I can't spend it on students, but
Sure,
it's
sure,
on
sure.
buildings and
But
grounds.
so the other school then, so the middle school,
Yes.
but the cooling tower will just wait, and you'll do it the next year?
Yes.
Okay, and then the entrance to the gymnasium, also at the middle school, and that will just wait?
Yeah, I have that scheduled for 1920, but I still have that included in the PEPL budget at this point in time. So
Right.
I'm not sacrificing anything.
So
If we
it'll
get
still
into-
happen, it'll just happen later?
No.
No, it's happening I haven't sacrificed that.
Yeah, actually, that's something we did discuss at the Pebble meeting, which we'll talk about maybe in a little bit, but jumping ahead to that, there was some discussion of pushing that project back to accommodate the additional million, but there was resistance to that. It was like, why should we wait? So the current Pebble budget that will be proposed, is that going to be our next meeting, I think?
Next meeting, yeah.
Will include actually that middle school addition to the gymnasiums the year prior to?
1920.
Is that prior to what the high school project will go forward?
Yes, that's right.
So we'll actually do that beforehand.
I'm sorry, I just want to be clear about the numbers and where the money's coming from, because Director Perez just asked you which programs were being pushed back, and I heard you say the cooling tower and the gymnasium entrance. So did I
That's the same
mishear?
as the vestibule. When he talks about the vestibule and the gymnasium entrance, that's one project.
That's one project.
Right, and so is that getting pushed back or is that not getting pushed back?
No, it's not getting pushed back. If we need to find more additional funds, then that's the option. I don't
see
think
what
I
you're
was really
saying.
clear. So everything is in there. The cooling tower's in there. The gymnasium entrance is in there. Also the $3 million each consecutive year for 3 years for the high school is in the PEPL budget. So I'm not sacrificing anything. We do have the flexibility, though, if we get into a bind, that we can shift some monies from year to
Okay.
year. That's all.
And then the other $7 million will come from SAVE.
Yes.
How much is in that? I thought we were tapped out with the pool.
So we can bond I had presented these numbers at a work session about a month or so ago, that if we bonded to capacity, 18.9 million, that there was $10 million left
Right.
after the pool.
But we don't have it now, is what you're saying.
No, we'd have to bond, but we're
Right.
going to have to bond regardless.
But we have the money for the pool now. Then
No,
the
not in total.
18 million.
No, not in total.
So we don't have that either.
The beginning, or the ending fund balance at the end of June was $5.8 million. I expect depending on how much of the construction gets done on the pool or how much we spend on architect and construction manager, I expect the fund balance to be about 6.3 million at the end of 19. It'll probably be higher because I think I've got it overestimated how much will get happen in FY19 for the pool. But we were planning on bonding for the pool regardless.
Okay.
It's just that we wouldn't have bonded 18
Right.
or 19 million. We would have bonded like 12 to 14 million because we had cash on hand. But we definitely don't have cash on hand to do the pool.
And you also said that there's 2 million extra. There was 2 million extra, but I didn't hear what fund that money was coming from.
Out of the sales tax, I've got.
That's from Save Two.
I've got 2 million projected to augment the additions to the 3 elementaries.
So if we bond at the 18 million, we'll have the 7 million we need for the building, however many millions we need for the pool, and then 2 extra million for the high school, for the elementary buildings.
Right, so even after projecting all of those expenses, I see the fund balance going down to about $1.5 million in sales tax. So you can't let it go down too much because those out years, those bond payments start, but.
And Jerry, you said that we would, if we just kind of plan for this as a way to kind of bridge the gap, that we would really know more January 28th, 2019, when you finish the design development phase. What do you anticipate is the target estimate by that time?
If I could tell you an honest answer for that,
I would love that.
I would be, so I'd probably be in heaven. I can give you a number, but I think that would be misleading. So I'd rather not say.
I don't want that.
The goal is to work, like I said, work both ends. I think the important thing is that we recognize that in order to build the high school correctly and to get the programs that we want in the space that we need, that we're going to have to increase the budget. We also, and still I want to challenge the architecture team to work on the design, to be able to design smart, come up with efficiencies and economies so they can get the budget down. It's not all up to us to just write another check. They need to work to be able to get the project into mind frame. So it's going to be somewhere between 0 and 14, and the goal is to keep it as close to 0, but recognizing it's not going to be 0.
Is it possible that at the end of the design development phase that the price will come back over 137.5?
It's always possible. I don't think it's very probable, though.
Okay. And is this process also going on with the pool?
Yes, I'm kind of looking at the project as a whole. So they're so integrated or interconnected that it's going to be working with both of them. So we've already done value engineering on the pool and got that downsized somewhat here.
And do you have a number for that? What we've valued engineered out of the pool?
Not right now. I could have to look that up and get it to you.
Is that still on the table? The pool?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's still included in the project.
So this work that you guys are working, what you're doing, this working towards kind of shrinking, kind of coming up with more money and finding more savings, the pool is still being considered. Even though you've already done some value engineering, you're going to continue to do more. And is there a sense amongst the steering committee, if there are cuts that need to be made, are those going to come from the pool? Are those going to come from the school? Are those going to come from both?
Yes.
What's the priority?
So what we need to do is find economies, and we need to be able to design smarter. One of the big things that came out is the site costs were a lot greater. Well, they were greater than what we had from program to schematic. So that gave us the ability, let's roll up our sleeves and dig up the site costs and understand where the value is. So based on the placement of the building, we realized that there's a lot of dirt that needs to get moved on and off site. Well, that was one that was easy. The other thing, easy to identify. The other thing is we have stormwater detention that we need to be able to create on that site, and so we're going to have to bury that. So there's other things, connection for the utilities, getting a water loop around the building that we're looking at being able to focus in on to be able to find some efficiencies and economies in. Other than that, it's a matter of choosing materials, whether you eliminate or select a lower cost material. So those are the type of things we want to do, but we don't want to cut the area. We want to be able to provide the building with the space that's needed for now and into the future.
And this, I swear it's my last question, perhaps for Superintendent Reisner or whoever, I'm wondering what is the mechanism to communicate this, what to me seems fairly complicated information, to the community so that they can kind of keep abreast of the project and understand what's going on and have opportunities to give feedback. Is there a mechanism planned for that?
I don't know that we've talked a lot at this point about how we're going to be rolling that out, but I think it would be in our best interest to do what we have done with the other updates that we've given the community. So doing it here at the board, having Eric work with the media end of it, doing the informational videos that he's done, communicating it out that way. I know Elisa and I and Alan went to Collegiate Methodist Church yesterday. So just, I think, us getting out and working with Eric on a communication plan.
I think one of the other things that we've missed in this opportunity, and I'm really glad you asked that question, the steering committee that was developed to build this was what then came up with this, oh gee, we have these higher costs. And it was also the steering committee that made the decision, separate from this board, of agreeing to, we're going to go, now we did have some discussions about how big and going in size in some workshops, but it was driven by the steering committee. We have a board committee that's called the Facilities Committee, which would be providing the transparency to the public because it has open meetings law requirements. And what I would like to start seeing is this high school committee that meets monthly reporting to the Facilities Committee, of which the public can then attend because they see it on an agenda and they know it's going to happen. But right now, we have a steering committee that, let's face it, meets in secret and not transparent to the public. I think that's our first step.
I think I would disagree that we meet in secret. I think, I mean, that's making it sound like we're doing something intentionally behind closed doors, and that's not it at all.
It was a rhetorical statement. What I'm saying is, when was the last time the Facilities Committee met? That's a question. Can somebody tell me that?
So what I would like to propose...
When was the last time the Facilities Committee met?
Because...
They haven't met
since
this year.
Okay? So, Director Rosser, if I may...
So that's the point. Can I finish first? Thank you. That's the point that I'd like to make, is that our committees need to start functioning. And it's this board that needs to take the responsibility of making those committees function. And I think the best way for us to be open to the community is to use those committees, because that's what they're intended to do, and that's what the open records law in this state is written for. So let's start there, and then we can talk about involving Eric and others to increase that communication.
So, Director Rosser, what I hear you saying is the steering committee should report monthly to the Facilities Committee, when I believe it's important to bring those steering committee updates to the entire board. If you would like us to, rather going in that direction, take it to the Facilities Committee first, that then will provide a delay. There's been no decisions on this plan by the steering committee. That's what this discussion is all about, is to understand that our professionals have come back with a budget that is now at $137.5 million, and we have an initial budget of 105 plus the 18 million that we've discussed through Save for the Pool. So so that's where our budget is right now. And the intent of this discussion is to say, we've got one number here and we've got one number here, and we've got to meet in the middle. And that's what this discussion with the board in front of the public is all about, is so that everybody understands we have to figure out where we want to go. And this board needs to understand that if we decide that we want to keep at the budget that we are sacrificing the program that we have rolled out through this deeper dive in this programming process that has been very transparent and has been with our staff and with our students and with the community, that's where we have been led to, because we've done a deeper dive in the programming compared to what we did in the Phase 1 study. So when you look at the initial part of Jerry's presentation here, it talks about the Phase 1 study when the square footage was smaller and the programming was not as detailed. We made a conscious decision as a board to go forward with the bond referendum knowing we had not taken that deeper dive. We could have waited to go to a bond referendum and done the deeper dive and had a clearer picture of what we were building, but we did not because we felt the timing was right. So now we come to where we are today, that we need to give our architects and our staff and our construction manager, we need to provide them direction on, do we want you to continue to move forward because we believe we can commit some money from other pools that we have, or do we want to halt this process and completely change, not completely change, but make some serious reductions to the program that we are developing for this new high school. That is the decision that is in front of the board right now. It is not a decision we will make, but we need to have an idea of where we are, of where our comfort level is.
I totally agree, and I began my discussion of this topic. As a matter of fact, this is not an action item, this is just an update.
Right.
But I began my comments here supporting going forward with this.
Okay, so then I want to hold on that, and let's not get into something else. I'd like to hear from some other board members. So do we have anything from Director Colton, Director Deerdorf, or Director Bierbaum? Because we've not heard from you.
I think I would like to know how often we will be getting updates from OPN, like where they are with the reducing of
The next
of the
update
cost.
with cost is going to be at the end of the design development phase.
Okay, so that is the
January.
that's the next time that we would get it. Okay, so
But-
that is the January.
But they were going to come in front of the board, though, I thought in November, correct, as an update? At our last steering committee meeting, the idea was to have OPN come back to give an update to the board of where we were at within that phase. So they will be back, in my understanding, they will be back prior to January's meeting to give
Okay,
an
that's what I was
update.
wondering. Okay, thank you.
I think the one thing that I know.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I think the one thing that I would make sure that we are being mindful of, and I understand I came into this process late. I came in June after the work was already done prior to that, but I still feel that it would be really difficult for me to support building a building for 1,400 students when our enrollment has increased consecutively over the past 2 years. Currently, I believe we're at 1,425 or 1,450 at the high school. And I believe that when we build a new building, we'll also grow. So to build a building that is for 1,400 students when we're already above that number is a little, and our trending is going upward, that's a little concerning to me. And I think the board, I mean, I'm just pointing that out publicly because I think it's important to keep that in mind. And while we talked a lot about the enrollment increasing, and I think that's something we need to consider as we look at why the cost went up. And I've said it to the board repeatedly, you know, cutting programming in terms of the academic programming, I think is really important to stay away from. The high school is looking at the structure they're looking at because it's a much more innovative and collaborative approach, and everything that we're learning and reading about in education talks about those soft skills that our students need to be successful. So they need that collaboration space, they need that open environment to be able to go out and be successful. And so I think it's up to us to ensure that we're not cutting programming that is going to impact the way we deliver our instruction to students.
So I'm very supportive of having 10 million added to the scope of this project. We've greatly, as Lisa talked about, changed what we're looking for in this high school. I think it's great to have 7 million from SAVE and 3 million from PEPL. I have challenged the administration, though, to continue to look for opportunities, whether it's in technology, the refresh of one-to-one, or such as the vestibule, but other ways in which we can potentially have funding should we have overruns. So Story's done a great job so far of budgeting of where we're at today, but until we actually go out to bid, we don't know what the cost will be. There is about $2.7 million in the project contingency. I don't want to earmark that for funding for a scope, but there is that there as well. So again, very supportive of the 10 million. The one thing I would say about the structure of the committee, this really is a staff working environment to go through the architectural design, and that's how we did it on the elementary schools. Once we got through design, it was passed off to facilities to really manage the project. So I would anticipate that happening once we go out to bid in January or February of next year, and then it'll go through the committee structure.
I guess I have one question for you, Jerry, for sure. On the numbers, the project cost summary numbers, there are a lot of great numbers you guys provided us, so thank you for that. It has a lot of the answers, but it has the pool estimate now is 16.5 million, where the last time we saw that was 18.5.
Yes.
Kind of to Director Benkin's question, is that from some of the value engineering, or where'd that number come down from?
It's a little bit from value engineering, plus what more so it's related to is the form of the cost estimate. So we have to draw a line between the pool and the building. So when we do that, we can separate the blocks and pieces and parts of the pool that are associated with the pool portion. But the mechanical and electrical, we haven't distributed that portion in the swimming pool. So that's a rough idea of what it is. It appears that the pool's going to come in on budget at the $18 million once we do a fair distribution of the equipment into that cost.
So some of the funding increase on the high school might have been from numbers that moved over from the pool to the high school and then will come back?
Yep. Well, okay. We'll be able to define them more confidently at the design development because we'll have equipment sized and located. And when we draw our line to be able to account for the pool portion of the cost, then we'll be able to associate the costs related to the pool more accurately.
And then you had discussed that you'd already started talking maybe about some of the site efficiencies. Do you have any feel for how much we can expect there? I mean, have you looked at any of those things yet, like in the past 10 days, to see is there room to move that number down? Personally, I'm a little bit worried that the number won't come down as far as we want, so I'm just interested to know how big are some of the things you guys are looking at?
There's a big number on that. I mean, kind of the things that they're looking at, for instance, is how do you run the sanitary sewer line? We were talking about one time of boring it underneath the stadium, or trying to be able to bore it partially underneath the school to be able to go to the southwest. But they found a shorter route. If we go to the northwest, we can hook up to a pretty deep sanitary line because it runs through the ravine between the prairie. Stormwater detention. One of the things that we did with that is if we locate that on the south end of the site, on the lower practice field area, there's less excavation that has to happen. And then as we build the site up, then we can use some of the excess material then to cover that up to put, ultimately the parking lot will go over that. So just some of those types of things. The other thing is because of the site cut and fill and trying to get that to balance, we've been working with the elevation, the final elevation of the building. So if we raise that elevation up, we can put a little bit more dirt on site, not have to take it off site. But we can't raise it up too high because then it gets too high from the curb and be able to get ADA access and get the ramps and the elevation changes in there. So things like that we're trying to work to make efficient. They tweaked the orientation of the building to make it a little bit more perpendicular instead of the kind of that angled offset. So it's a little bit more, not quite sterile, but rectangular, I guess, rather than obtuse.
So I know we were looking at the end of January for having kind of the next cost estimate update, really. Will some of these efficiencies, will we be able to get like delta cost estimates or something? Because it sounds like some of the things you're talking about maybe a month from now we'll have a better handle on. I know I don't really want to wait 3 months and then all of a sudden be presented with a number, right? Is that something you can do in working with OPN and Story?
I think we'll be able to kind of track and find out relative differences as we're able to, assess a portion of the estimate that we can refine once the information is available. But it kind of gets to a point where you need to get the drawings finalized to a certain point so that they're not as dynamic, take a snapshot in time. And so in order to be efficient with our time, it's worth waiting, I think, till that we get that design development set out, so we have something static and tangible to estimate.
I mean, to what Director Rossern said earlier, we don't have, it sounds like we're not going to have a good, solid estimate to even have at a committee meeting and a public number until the end of January, and that makes me uncomfortable. I'd really like to see some of that earlier. So the direction I would kind of like to give as a recommendation is, please see if you can get some of those numbers earlier, because we want to see those, the community wants to see them. And I get what you're saying, the number is going to be a lot more accurate at the beginning of January, totally understand. But we need to see something sooner. And if there's a way we could do that. The other thing I would say is, the way Director Rosser started it out, I think I'm supportive of this idea of using some money from these other areas. I'm not necessarily willing to say how much. Like, 10 million does sound like a lot to me. I'm not comfortable right now saying that. I really want to know how close can we get these numbers together. I'd really like to see if we could kind of direct the architects and the staff to work on finding ways to come up with that plan and give us more details before we have to really, I know we're not going to take a vote, right? But before we even say that we're comfortable with it. Because a lot of this information is very new, right? So again, I guess I'm just reiterating, the sooner you can get us better information.
Dean, since we have the opportunity, since you're here, could you maybe come forward and tell us what may be some opportunities for some incremental updates between now and January 28th, if there are any, in terms of progress updates on how we're doing to squeeze this? Obviously, you won't be on the side of the district in terms of increasing, but updates maybe the board could expect on how that value engineering process is taking place.
So I guess this is on. So I think what's important is, so one, we're continuing to work the issues, work the problems. What's important about, I think, tonight or this discussion is it's the opportunity for the board to give us some direction on whether our target should be go to 123 or somewhere above that. The real critical issue here is that some decisions can be made to bring it down, but they're not reversible as we move forward. So as we look, we've challenged OPN at this point to make some changes and save some money in interior finishes, in the cost of the exterior skin on the building. We're looking hard at the site work and trying to find economies in siding the building, dealing with stormwater, finding some alternatives within the site work to do that. And we'll be tracking the plus deltas on that as we move forward. We already are doing that. And so is that an answer to your question, Lisa?
Mm-hmm.
So then you think that, would it be reasonable, like a month from now, or a month and a half from now, we could get an update that's before the end of January on some of those numbers?
So I think, yeah, in that time frame, it's easy to say, which direction are we moving, the right direction or the wrong direction? And we'll have a feel for, while we may not be able to pull together a detailed to the dollar estimate of where we are, we'll know the direction, the trend that we're moving.
Go ahead. Because really what OPN needs is to know is, are we increasing the scope to 16 and 18? Because right now they're at 14 and 16 based upon the 123. So tonight I think it'd be helpful for the board to have consensus. We think we can find 10 million to put into this thing. We won't know exactly where we're going to be at, and again, Dean's work will help down the road, but I think the board needs to make a concerted effort to say, yes, we're supportive of moving the project forward so the architects can keep working at those bigger figures.
Correct.
Just move forward without cutting square footage of the building.
Correct.
And sacrificing program. Just
correct.
Although I guess without cutting program square footage. So if we can find savings of square footage and the efficiency of the building, that's one of the things that we're looking at. But to the point of cutting the program that has been asked for, that's what we need to understand. Do we want to do that? I mean, I think Jerry said at the beginning, right now, we've got a project that includes almost everything that has been asked for. Mm-hmm. We haven't looked at compromising the requests, the wishes, the needs.
Any other questions, comments?
Yes. In no way, shape, or form was I talking about delaying information going to the public. I was simply saying that we need to use our facilities committee. The facilities committee can meet whenever it wants to meet. So they can receive reports. They can make those reports to the board on a weekly basis. And that, I think, is a need for the transparency of this information. If that had been going on throughout the summer, as the steering committee had been meeting and coming to these conclusions, then it wouldn't be the first time that the public would be hearing that we're talking about a $14 million increase in the cost of this project. It would have been more incremental. That discussion would have been more open. So I'm hoping that we're able to get those, that additional information between now and January. We can have that information, and it's critical for the community to continue to support this project. I believe strongly in it, but we need to be completely open about where the funds are coming from, how we're going to spend them. That's our responsibility.
Jerry, what was the number at the end of schematic design? Was it the 137 when you all came to us at our board meeting?
137.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had that number then when you came to the board, and then now this more recent discussion. So, okay.
We're moving along at a rigorous pace here, and so we've got the schematic design was completed, and then the CM needs time to be able to prepare an estimate. The estimate was prepared. We presented to the steering committee. The steering committee didn't make any decisions, but decided or gave us direction as far as what actions to take in preparation to present it to the school board and be transparent and get it out to the public. So I think just wanted to be able to let us know about that.
Thank you.
So do we have a consensus?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. If I could, each of us could, I feel like I have a sense maybe from some of us on where we may be, but if we could reiterate, so we can't vote on anything tonight.
No.
However, we could, if we're feeling like we desire to have an actual vote, we can discuss that so that it can be put on the agenda for the next meeting. But we cannot take an actual vote tonight. We can identify whether or not we have consensus, but we cannot make a vote, so.
Well, I've been pushing for this size. That is something that, so when with Director Rosser, I was surprised as well. I do understand it. I see, it is hard for me to compromise the size. I can't have this project and reduce the size. I've been thinking a lot about this. The size is very important to me. We have 1450 in the high school right now. So it would be hypocritical for me to ask to reduce it when I've been the one, I've been really pushing this. So as I stand right now, I support us finding the money. I really like Director Rosser's idea about if PEPL passes, maybe we can take pressure off of SAFE. I think that's a great idea. As I stand right now, I would support the direction, and I hope you're getting what you need from us in that sense. I think I would support staying with this size. I am worried about what we're asking OPN to reduce. So I've also been pushing the sustainable energy, and I'm fearful that that might not happen because we're pushing them to reduce so many things. So I want to keep pushing that part as well. I want to get everything. So I will be supportive of the direction of the money from SAVE and PEPL and keep the size.
I'd like to move more, that we move on with the agenda, orders of the day. That's a proper procedure motion, because I think we're getting into a discussion of an item that's not really on the agenda for discussion or vote. So I think we should just move on to the next item.
My concern is, what do we tell OPN? I mean, if we wait until 2 more weeks, they're 2 more weeks behind. So I'm supportive of moving this forward in consensus, not having a formal vote, that we're in agreement to make this scope bigger, since staff has allocated resources for it. So I think we need to just maybe move forward.
I mean, I think we need to make it clear to OPN as well. The one concern I have, I said it earlier, as OPN's looking at these things, I would like them to make sure they let us know what things they are considering, or basically, how did they get the number down if they get it down? So like Director Colton was saying, I would like to know what's happening there, and I would like the more frequent updates about that, just so we can clarify it. Like I said earlier, I'm still not comfortable necessarily committing to any specific number, but in concept, the idea of, this is the school we need. The thing I keep going back to is, we spent all that time through the schematic design with, 50-some meetings with different stakeholders, community, students, I mean, very public, very open. And this is what they came back and said, this is what we need. So it seems to me we've got to find a way to build it, or build as close as we can to it. So I'm in support of telling OPN to continue with that larger size at least.
I think our job as school board members is complicated, but I also think it's really simple. And from my perspective, we have an obligation to listen to our community, and I think our community was clear that they wanted a really nice high school for our students. And I appreciate everyone who came out and said what they wanted to be a part of the school, and I'm not hearing anyone say that we don't want that. And we do understand that it costs money. And if we're able to come up with the money, certainly I think that's our obligation. Our other obligation is to manage the money. And so I think for me, where the disconnect is trying to listen to our community and give them what they want while still managing that fiduciary responsibility piece. And so I am, of course, willing to move forward with what our community has asked for, what we've asked our community for, but I do feel like that the more information, the better. Really understanding as best we can what the numbers look like. Where is the money coming from? Who's paying for it? Like, I think those are just reasonable things that will help our community continue to be a partner with us in this work that we really all do want to accomplish.
I'm okay with using additional funds for this. I mean, you've said that there aren't programs that are going to suffer by taking possible PEPL dollars out of there. That's a really good thing, because I don't want to get into a situation where it's going to cost us more later by pushing off projects now. That would not be a very wise decision. But also, as long as we're not putting ourselves into any financial danger by borrowing too much or having a potential issue if we have something come up, then I'm okay with using that money.
And I think I know where you are, Director Rosser, in terms of, from your initial statements of moving forward with identifying those. So that provides some direction for Story and for OPN as they're moving forward. Appreciate you providing us with the information, Jerry. I think that Director Bankin, I appreciate your comments, because I actually had someone say, well, I would have voted for more money on it, but it is that dynamic of what was that appropriate number last spring for us to put on the bond referendum. But this is, we are delivering something that our community has some high expectations for, and I really appreciate that about our community, because as we have learned through the programming phase, we want this to be a welcoming place. We want this to be a space that our community will come in and utilize, and that our high school students will have a really great academic experience in. And so this is that tug and pull that we are doing in this complicated role. So I appreciate the conversation this evening. So thank you. Thanks.
President Franson, would you mind if I'd read the conveyance of real estate for the public hearing. We didn't actually approve that motion.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Would you mind if I do the vote for the tennis courts?
I thought that we had missed it. So,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
before you do that, I would like to provide the opportunity for any public comments on the update on the Ames High School project.
Amy Edwards, 1204 Arizona Ave. Thank you for having this tough discussion. Definitely as a resident and a voter, I'm all in on this high school, and I think we need to do it right the first time. However, I am concerned about the Pebble. And I say that only because as a parent at Sawyer, we were a renovated building. We are still having issues with our building. And I was trying to write the list down. There was an issue with sewer line. We've got front issues with the fascia soffit where water's dripping, and in the winter it freezes into ice, and then we could have a liability onto our thing. We've got bricks in the back of the building that are cracked, flushed up against us. A lot of families have shared this. I don't know if it's being communicated to the school board or to Jerry. We still have leaking pipes in our building. We have the heating and cooling. We still have rooms that are hot and some that are not. We have issues at our building that we need to have Pebble money for. And I can understand millions to millions maybe don't make that much of a difference, but when you're one of two buildings that I think still have a lot of unfinished projects, I struggle personally with how much money from Pebble could come for this high school. So where you guys go to meet in that middle, that's your job, that's the hard job. But I just don't want us to lose sight of that. And obviously Mitchell's the other building. They too were renovation, and I'm sure they have their own issues and things that are coming. So just being mindful of that we don't lose sight of who's defining what projects are important, what that looks like, by whose definition, and when we're not in there with our students and our families. Like, again, I'm just speaking only from what I see every day, almost every day when I'm in at Sawyer, helping that our building still has concerns and things that need to be addressed. So just leaving that with you. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
Any other comments from the public? Seeing none, we are going to backtrack, and thank you for catching that because I felt like I had missed something when we were there. So I will entertain the motion on the tennis court easements.
I move the board approve the real property described herein shall be conveyed by the district to the city of Ames for good and valuable consideration. Conveyance by the district shall be an easement agreement. The board president and secretary are authorized to sign all conveyance documents for the real property described herein. The board president, secretary, superintendent, and administrative officers of the district are authorized to take all actions necessary to complete the above described transaction, including execution of ancillary documents.
Second?
It's been moved by Deerdorf and seconded by Beerbaum. Any discussion? Seeing none, we will vote on roll call.
Foster, aye.
Perez, aye.
Bacon, aye.
Beerbaum, aye.
Franzen, aye.
Deerdorf, aye.
Colton, aye.
Thank you. Passes 7-0. We will move to the next item, board committee updates. Anything, directors, that you would like to highlight that was in Exhibit D2?
I'll just talk briefly about the equity committees. The equity committee met on October 22nd. We are finalizing our plans to have the committee's full report to the board for, I believe it's December 10th? December 10th. And so we are, we've turned on the gas. So we're working on that. And we have a next meeting set for November 19th at 1 o'clock here in the district office.
Anything else? Seeing none, any comments from the public on our board committee updates? All right, we will go ahead and move to the public forum, and I have one member of the public listed to speak, Virginia Hansen.
She left.
She left? Okay. All righty. We will go ahead and
Let's
move.
make sure she's not out in the hallway. Virginia. No, she left. I think she might have
I
had
don't know what she looks like.
I think she left.
How about we'll move to consent items, but if we identify if she walks in, we will come back to that. So consent items.
She wasn't out there, Gail? Okay.
Okay, thanks for checking.
Move approval of consent.
Second.
Moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Colton.
Yeah.
Perez.
Thank you, Perez.
Minutes from the meeting held October 15th, 2018. Financial reports from September 2018. Claims and payroll for September 2018. Personnel report. Open enrollment requests. And contract agreements. Agreement with Life Touch for student IDs. Those are at the high school. Agreement for Steve's Mobile Music for Ames Middle School, 7th and 8th grade parties. And foster care memorandum of agreement with Iowa Department of Human Health Services.
Thank you. Moved by Deerdorf, seconded by Perez. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. We will go ahead and move to the first action item, policies for approval, Series 200, Board of Directors.
I would move that we approve Series 200 Board of Education policies as presented, except for we would pull 210.5 and 210.8. They did not get their text updated as per the discussion last meeting, so we would move those off to the next meeting where they can have that language updated.
Second. Moved by Beerbaum, seconded by Benkin. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Policy 505.8 for approval.
I move the board approve policy 505.8 as presented.
I second.
Moved by Benkin, seconded by Beerbaum. Discussion.
Actually, I'm going to jump into a discussion for our audience. The previous one that we just passed, we did discuss very much at the last one. So I don't want you to think that, wow, that's a lot of policy, that they're just like, wow, passing. So yeah, at our last meeting, we talked about that quite a bit. So I just wanted to make that clarification along with this one also.
Thank you. One thing I want to state about policy 505.8, and I touched base with Superintendent Reisner today because there's a lot of directives to staff in this policy, and so I wanted to check with her that we are understanding that this is a policy that the Department of Education has encouraged us to pass, but IASB is working on with the Department of Education to make it so that it is less restrictive. But I did want to touch base with Superintendent Reisner to make sure that this does, what are the expectations this creates for Dr. Jones and the work that he does. But what I take from that is that we're okay, but I want her to address that.
I also confirmed with Dr. Jones on that this is the policy that he would like moving forward.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear because there's a lot of directives in it for the work that you do. So, all right, it has been moved by Bank and seconded by Beerbaum. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0. Items from the board.
Just a quick note. Our board policy is to use rubber rules of order to operate this meeting. And I'm not going to belabor this, and I
didn't quite hear. Could you repeat that first?
I'm sorry. Sure. It is the policy of this board, and many boards throughout the United States, is to use Robert's Rules of Order to operate this meeting. When particular motions are made, in the future, I hope that we follow them. The motion I made earlier was not followed by the chair, and it should have been addressed by our parliamentarian for information. I will not get into the details. We will have a discussion about that later on, but in the future, I really hope that we can agree to do that.
Duly noted. Anything else from the board?
I would like to say one thing. I really appreciate Eric Schmidt and all of his work he's doing. One of the things that I know that the new board that was seated last fall made the emphasis on wanting to be proactive in our communication. I think Eric, as well as our other staff, are doing a great job of being out there and providing our story because it hasn't always been told. So thank you for your efforts. Spinning off of that, I really always appreciate our students at Ames High. Every year they do a campaign to get students registered to vote that can, and it's wonderful to see engagement of our student body and what they value, and hopefully they'll get out to vote next week. So again, thanks for your work, Eric, and then also our student body advocating for voting.
I just want to briefly thank Dr. Prince for bringing her class to observe us today. I have also been meaning to welcome Lynn in the back. She's our new school beat person from the Ames Tribune, so just welcome to her.
One comment I would have is, as we made reference, there was a presentation that a few of us made yesterday, and one thing I was encouraged by was there was a high school teacher there who commended OPN for the work they were doing and how they involved the high school staff, and also I know a number of us were interested in the discussions that the principal at high school is making about some of the schedule changes, things like that. Sounds like those have been discussed quite a bit with the teaching staff, and they're continuing to be, and he said that it's better than it's ever been as far as involving the staff in those type of discussions. So I was really happy to see that, and I think a lot of that's from the leadership of the new superintendent, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
I also wanted to thank our high school students for the blood drive that they did. I don't know if you all saw something, there was an article about that, but they saved lives by doing that, so I really, really appreciate them doing that.
All right, items from the superintendent.
I just thought I would give a quick enrollment update, and this is as of today. So there just has been continuing just a few tweaks here and there, but I think that our total district number of students served is 4,713. Our served number, this would be the number of increased students from last year, is 126. So 126 that are new this year, and of those, these are our current, oh yes, our resident number, because we have talked a little bit about the resident number, and that's at about 83, 84 students.
So it's a
question. I can see the
increase
face.
of 126, but in that number is 83
resident students.
Yeah.
So we have, does that make more sense, Monique? Okay, got it. So we have our resident, and we have our open enrolled students as well, and the total increase is 126.
What was the total number again? Sorry.
That's okay. 4,713.98. So I'd round up, but so that is just a quick update on that. Also, we've been talking about our enrollment struggles at elementary, and I just wanted to provide you with a quick update that I had identified a number of data points that I wanted to have collected, and we had two of our staff members here in the district office working on that, and they actually finished, and so they delivered me numbers on Friday. So I will be able to begin to do some snapshots of each building that'll tell us who is in the building, who are open enrolled students who are in the building that are also outside of their school area, and who we've moved out, and so a bunch of different ways that we can come up with the snapshot of each of our elementaries so that we can have some further discussion on that moving forward. Also, just a quick update on work with equity. Katie and Daniel were back for the first time since I guess, to do a big training for us. They've been back once or twice and done meetings with us, but this was the first time that they were back to continue our work that had gone on last year. It was outstanding. I think that everybody, our directors and principals would definitely agree. The work was really excellent with them. We worked our first session with them was 3 hours with the principals, directors. I think that was everyone in that group, and continuing to really dig deeper into the work. And then the second session was our assistant principals and kind of those capacity building teams from within the buildings. So who have the principals identified to carry on that work with them side by side, along with the building coaches and teacher leaders. So excellent, an excellent day. And I wanted to say that it was Friday afternoon, and the second group was that capacity building group, and I think there was maybe 40 to 60 people in that group, and the excitement was unbelievable. They were here until, I think they got done at, am I right, about 4 o'clock, and it was 4:45, and they were still in here buzzing with discussion and not wanting to leave without talking with each other. So it was excellent. And that's all I have. Yeah.
Superintendent Reisner, so you were mentioning about the numbers for the elementary schools, and you said you're going to be you have numbers, and then you're going to get those to the board about who's there, who's open enrolled. Is there any way, and if that's fine, if not, but it would also be interesting to know the staff as well, how each one of those schools is staffed.
Oh,
in terms of EAs.
Great point.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. That's actually not something I had collected. Very easy to get.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
One thing I'll add, I know that there are some staff going to the Building Inclusive Organizations Wednesday, the training put on by the Chamber and
Yes.
Iowa State. I know myself I'm going, but I know that's an opportunity. Who else is going from the staff?
I believe we have Darcy. Did you know you're going? Yes.
Wednesday, yes.
Are you going? Okay, Darcy might be going. Anthony is going, Lisa is going, Amy is going, and I'm not sure who the other, there's 4 of our staff going. I'm going as part of Leadership Ames, but I'll be with my group.
And I know the invitation was sent to all. It's not a situation that but I just wanted to note that the district is participating in that. Okay, and for the board planning calendar, our next meeting is November 12th, and I want to highlight it will start at 5:30, and it is starting at 5:30 because then we will have a work session beginning at 6:30 with Paul Gorski to discuss our district's definition of equity. So please make note of that on your calendars, that our board meeting will start an hour earlier. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Perez, seconded by Rosser. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Passes 7-0.